name is Gianfranco Berardi, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I encourage curiosity and support creativity through my solo indie game development studio, GB Games, LLC. This is the Freshly Squeezed Progress Report companion video to go with the Freshly Squeezed Progress Report blog post I published earlier. Check the link in the description below. Since my last report, I've optimized the dungeon rendering code and then replanned my remaining backlog for The Dungeon Under My House, my second Freshly Squeezed entertainment project. If you've been following along, you know that The Dungeon Under My House will be a non-violent, first-person dungeon crawler, and as a Freshly Squeezed entertainment project, it will be a polished, playable prototype that provides a complete entertainment experience. It will be freely available for desktop computers as well as mobile devices, with no ads, no in-app purchases, and no personal data tracking. Fair warning, this update is a bit technical at times. I envisioned light sources that spread light to adjacent cells in the dungeon, with the brightness lowering over distance. I also wanted some dungeon cells to have ambient light in the absence of light sources. I decided to represent the light levels in a dungeon as data that mirrors the structure of the dungeon levels. So for each dungeon cell, there's a dungeon light level at that location that indicates what color and what light level of brightness that light should be. 0 would be pitch black, and 10 would be full brightness. I think this data structure works well, and so the next step was figuring out the exact algorithm for populating the data. To start, all light levels for the dungeon would be set to whatever those cells have defined as their ambient levels, and the default is pitch black. Then for each light source, the light would spread to adjacent cells, losing brightness for each cell. After manually trying a few approaches on paper, I hit upon a way to handle the propagation and attenuation, and wrote out the algorithm before writing code. I test drove my solution, and I added logs that help me identify ways to optimize it so it doesn't process cells that it doesn't need to. Once I had the light levels populating properly, I could work on actually rendering the dungeon using those light levels. The dungeon walls and things such as doors and ladders were fairly straightforward to update. Basically, for each column of my raycasting code, it would draw part of a texture and tint it by that cell's color and brightness setting. It works more or less fine. I multiply the brightness levels by 10%, so pitch black is 0%, and full brightness is 100%, but I think maybe 10% drops in brightness are too drastic, and especially going from 10% to 0%. I'll explore different ways to use the brightness level to draw darker and brighter cells and see what looks decent. But first, I need to work on the ceilings and floors, which handle rendering a bit differently. Rather than draw slivers of a texture the way the walls do, drawing the ceilings and floors works pixel by pixel using the actual source texture's color data. Modifying this color, represented as a uint32, based on the light source and the brightness level, is a bit trickier, and I didn't get to solve it by the end of the week. So that's the first thing to tackle this week. Thanks for watching, and stay curious. Now if you want to learn when I release The Dungeon Under My House, or about future freshly squeezed entertainment games I'm creating, then sign up for the GB Games Curiosities newsletter, and download full color player's guides to my existing and future games for free. Again, check the links in the description.